Seth.
Mr. Speaker, there have been two acts of monumental folly imposed on the railway industry during the last 50 years. Firstly, back in 1963, we had the Beeching Report, which led to the butchering of lines linking communities throughout the UK. And indeed, one consequence of Beeching is very relevant to the debate we're having today, because one of the lines he closed was the Great Central Line, running from London to Sheffield to Manchester.
That's right. Yep.
If that line had still been in operation, then I would suggest we would be having a debate about whether we should be spending money on upgrading that line, rather than committing £17 billion, rising to £32 billion, on High-Speed 2, for which the infrastructure work will not even begin until 2017. And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the second monumental folly imposed on the railways was the decision in the 1990s to privatise the railways, which of course was something that even Mrs. Thatcher steered clear of. She had the good sense to realise you cannot privatise a railway system and divorce operating companies from the infrastructure. And of course, as we all know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, privatisation has brought no benefit whatsoever to the consumer, and the subsidies that are now paid to the train operating companies are double what they were pro rata when British Rail ceased to exist. Now, the Secretary of State was a little bit reluctant earlier in answer to a question posed as to what the subsidy was. Well, I'll help him out. It's £2.6 billion a year is spent on subsidising a railway system which is not fit for purpose. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would have hoped that the Secretary of State and his colleagues would not be bringing to the Chamber today something that I believe will be yet another folly imposed on the railway industry, particularly in view of all the economic information which has come out over the last 2 years as the economic case has unravelled. Regrettably, this appears not to be the case. Reference has already been made to the National Audit Office report, but the comments that have been made in that report should be repeated again and again and again, not least the fact that they estimate that there's already a £3.3 billion financial shortfall in the funding, figures that have just been glossed over, as my good friend, the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and Pancras said, so far as the figures that have been talked about in London are concerned. And indeed, the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee has made the point that the government's business case is, I quote, farcical, and I quote, clearly not up to scratch. And furthermore, it said, some of the department's assumptions are, I quote again, ludicrous. Now, this is the National Audit Office and the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and yet we're told again and again today, no, the figures do stack up.
Could I give just on that point? Has he also looked at the really interesting French research, as the French rapid trains were introduced, the deleterious effect on the provincial cities of France? It's there. It's what happened. It drove those cities into penury.
I have, and my honourable friend made this point earlier. There is a report that makes just that point, that it doesn't actually spread wealth out. Quite to the contrary. Now,
I thank the member for giving way. He makes the point that infrastructure spend does not spread wealth out, as I understand it. In that case, would he like to make the North really prosperous by closing the M1 and the M6?
Silly man, look at the research.
well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are where we are. what I don't wish to have an argument about whether the building of the M1 and the M6 was folly. What is folly, I do have to point out, is the privatised section of the M6, which is uneconomic and will soon go bust. And this was something that was very much supported by the Conservatives. Let's bring private capital into our motorways, and you have a part of a motorway which is never used and which will soon go bust, or else they will come to the Secretary of State and ask for a handout. Did my honourable member want to come back?
He's very generous on a third intervention. I just make the point again. The logic of his argument is that the North would be richer if the M1 and the M6 and maybe the existing West Coast Main Line were all closed. That's ridiculous.
You study economics at primary school?
Well, I hear what my honourable friend says, but I don't understand quite the point that he's trying to make.
You didn't. It's stupid.
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
Absolutely stupid.
as I said, we need to look at the economic case. And what the National Audit Office have said and what other reports have said is that this is a project which is already spiralling out of control, where already figures that we were told about a year or so ago just don't stack up, and where it appears the people who have a vested interest in pushing this project ahead seem to be plucking figures just out the sky to suit whatever argument they're making. And at the end of the day, it will be the British taxpayer who has to pick up the tab if it goes wrong. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the idea at this moment in time of austerity in the country and cutbacks across a range of services, the idea that reducing travelling time by businessmen by 30 minutes from Birmingham to London or by 1 hour from Manchester to London is absolutely farcical. It seems to completely forget the fact that businessmen on trains nowadays tend to work on trains. They use computers, they use mobile phones, and I've not had one single solitary businessman in Birmingham who said to me, unless this project goes ahead and unless I can travel from Birmingham to London 30 minutes quicker, my business is going to suffer and I will be in danger.
I'll come straight back to him on that point, because I've met with a lot of businesses in Birmingham who are arguing very, very strongly for HS2. And a lot of your the honourable gentleman's constituents are definitely asking for it.
Give us details.
Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I say again, I've not had one businessman who has come to me to make the argument this project is absolutely desperate. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Secretaries of State always like to leave a legacy, and I understand that. But High Speed 2, I believe, will not be a legacy. I believe it's a vanity project, and if it goes ahead, I believe it could turn into a white elephant.
Just to say...